Thank you all for joining the webinar today. Today's webinar is going to be for creative staff. So what we mean by that is we're going to be going over how to do time entry. We're going to look at how you can see what tasks you are assigned to. And then we're also going to talk through communication. So how do we communicate regarding projects and or tasks, and then have that visible within Workamajig. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. A couple of housekeeping tips would be, obviously this is recorded. So we will post the recording in that support help guide. So if you're unsure of where that is, if you go to support.workamajig.com, you have that link there. That's the help guide. And then there's a webinars link here. It will be in the previous ones, but right now it's in the upcoming. You'll see a link for this here once the recording has rendered. So if someone missed it or if you'd like to re-review it, obviously we do post all of the recordings within this webinar section. And again, that will usually be within a couple of days from the actual webinar. So I suspect by the end of this week, we would see that posted. Okay. Also, any questions that you have along the way? I know there's a chat and a Q&A feature. If you could just all put them in the chat feature, that would be great. I'll monitor both, but it's just easier if we're using just one of those for any questions. And then I will always pause for questions as we continue to go through the webinar. So again, any questions you have, type them in the chat. I'll take a break throughout the webinar just to get to all of those questions. So today, again, we're talking through the creative side. So if I'm a creative, how do I go in and kind of manage my work within Workamajig? So usually whenever you sign into Workamajig, this is your landing page. It is called the Today Creative page. There's a couple of different views. So you might be looking at this card view. You might also have a grid view available to you. Both of those will show the same exact information. It's just displayed a little bit different, and the functionality will be the same as well. So just know that if you're more of a grid person, you would like to see all of your tasks in a grid style, then you should have this as an option. Otherwise, the default was this card view, again, showing all the same tasks and all the same information. You might have yours a little bit condensed. So if you see an arrow or a caret pointing down, that typically denotes that there's additional information that you can choose to see if you need to. But ultimately, I have mine always showing all detail, and I'll show you how to get there once we do that. But this is basically my list of tasks that I've been assigned to. So it's not anyone else's. It's usually just whoever you're signed in as. Any tasks that have been assigned to you will show on this page. And mine's grouping by date, which is the default, just so I know what tasks I need to work first and then continue on throughout my day. What's nice is you do have a search feature. So if there's something that you're going to be working on for a couple of weeks, you're going to do a couple hours per week, or maybe you're ready to work on it because you have something that you need to do, you can always use this search function. If you have a decently long list of tasks, you can always type in through the search. This could search the project name, project number, the task name, the service, the task ID even. So there's quite a few different options for this. So if I say, I know I'm assigned to the kickoff meeting, if I start typing in kick to assign or to look for that particular task, then it went in and found anything that was associated with the word that I chose. So just know that you can use the search option. And then again, if I do something like account management or something like that, then you would also be able to search that in there as well. So however you want to use that search is fine. Otherwise, again, you can kind of scroll through to look at your tasks. How we read this is it's going to show the project number, the project name, and then the client code. I'm assigned to a phase called concept development, and my actual task is concept/creative direction. I'm supposed to do account management, which is my service or my role for that particular task. It'll tell me how many days I have left or if it's been overdue. So obviously this is in red. It shows that it's been overdue by, some 72 days or so. It'll also tell you the priority of the task. All the tasks will default to medium level priority. There's low and there's also high. But if no one's changing the priority, then everything should just default to medium, as you can see kind of throughout my tasks. If you have been allocated hours, you get to see what is allocated versus what's remaining. If I was not allocated at all, you would not see that allocation. But in Workamajig, our recommendation is that we allocate hours just so we have an expectation of how many hours someone would be busy throughout the week or that particular day. So you'll always see that I have allocated hours on my schedule or on my task. And then if you're using to-dos, and if there are to-dos associated with this particular task, you would see how many open to-dos there are. So only this task, and I think one other might have to-dos on it, but not all will have those to-dos. And to-dos in Workamajig are basically an additional kind of checklist, additional information that you can tag to a particular task, just so that we know or we can give a guideline of what's expected within this particular task. So if you see to-dos, then there's something additional that you'll need to go in and do. When I click on the card, there would be a link to what the to-dos are. So this is my actual to-do. Obviously, it's not very detailed, but this is how I can go in and see if I know that there's a to-do on there, how I can actually go in and see that to-do or what that consists of. You can also see if there's been any updates. So what this means is it'll say one new update from the last time that I had seen this card. Was there any updates to this particular task? An update could be how much in allocations there were, could be that there was a to-do added, could be the due date or the start date change. So something with this task changed since the last time that I viewed it. If there's not been any updates, then you'll see something that says no new updates. You also have an option to indicate what % complete this task is. So if you hover over it, it'll say set task complete. It basically gives you the option to put in how complete you are with this task. Now, some people are divided over whether they would use, 10%, 20, 25, and all of these. Usually people say it's 0% complete, and then once they're done, they just mark it 100% complete. Sometimes they are not using the in-betweens to indicate how complete they are with that particular task. So if you're not utilizing that, that's completely fine, but it is an option if you at least want to indicate where you're at with your particular task. Now, one important note is that this does not have anything to do with allocation or any actual hours that you've added. So I can put that I'm 90% complete. That won't affect my timesheet. I can also put that I'm 100% complete. That has nothing to do with my timesheet at all. So just know that the two are not exclusive. A % complete is literally just going to update and show someone, if they're looking at the schedule, how complete you are with that particular task. The next icon over is project details. So depending on what you have access to as a creative, you might see all of these, you might see some of these. This might not be the full list, but it just depends on what your access to the project is. The dashboard is just truly opening up the actual project. And so if I want to open it up in another tab, I use my control on a PC and I clicked the option for dashboard, and it opened up the dashboard. So this is the dashboard of the project in another tab. So just know that you can have multiple tabs. You don't have to sign in to each one. It'll just remember who you were signed in as if you're in the same tab or the same browser. And so I have the actual dashboard of the project open. Otherwise, if I wanted to jump directly to the schedule, then I could have just clicked schedule. I'm going to open it up in another tab again, and then I'd be able to jump to the actual schedule of this project. So I mentioned I was assigned to a phase. If you weren't sure what that is, it's basically like a summary task, and then these are subtasks under it. So this is the summary of the phase that I was in, but my actual assignment is that concept and creative direction. And when I click in to look at the assignments, this is where those allocations are coming from. So here was my actual assignment. And if I had marked my part of the task any percent complete, this is where that would update. So I would be able to see how complete someone is with their particular task. In that percent complete. Otherwise, if you have a task percent complete somewhere on here, then you can also see that reflected in there as well. So that is how you can kind of read these cards. The last icon is the actual time entry. So if you hover over it, it'll say add time or timers. So when we click on this, this gives me 3 different options. One is going to be a new time entry. One is to start a timer, and then the other is to add meetings. These two are obviously to actually fill out a timesheet or create a time entry that would then fill out my timesheet. This one is manual. What I mean by that is when I click on it, I have to indicate how many hours I worked on it. So maybe I worked on it quarter of an hour. It put all the details in here for me. So I really shouldn't have to change any part of this because this is what was designated to me as far as what service I was supposed to do and what project and task. It'll also default to today, but of course, if you just forgot to do your time for yesterday, you can backtrack if you needed to as well. There's also this I'm done with this task option. And this would actually mark your part of the task complete. So 100% done, kind of similar to this one. It's just this one doesn't allow you to do time entry at the same time. So if you need to mark your task done, then really all you have to do is do your timesheet at the same time and then check that box to indicate that you're done. If you're not done, if you're still working on that particular task, then don't check this box and this task will stay on your Creative Today page up until you actually mark it done. So if I need to continue to do time entry for that, then I'm going to leave this blank. You also have a comment field. So if your company requires comments, or if you would like to indicate what you did on this particular task, then the detail of what you did can go here. And people can see this whenever they are looking at transactions for that project. If they're looking at your timesheet, they'll also be able to see those comments associated with this particular time entry. You'll notice there's a show more. This is kind of throughout the system. You'll usually see there's something that usually indicates that there's additional fields. It's just we don't show them automatically or don't show them as the default just because they might be less common. But if you click on the show more, then really what came in is this start and end time. Obviously, if you're just doing a manual time entry and indicating that you did a quarter of an hour, you don't necessarily have to indicate exactly what time did you work on that. But this is more for timers. So if I had started a timer, which I will show you next, then this would automatically default in as what time I started and what time I finished. So that's what's in your show more. You don't have to see those fields if you don't need to. So I usually leave it as showing less. And then when I go ahead and hit save, that will actually put in my time entry. So you'll notice it updated my card. Now I only have a quarter of an hour left for this particular, a quarter of an hour left out of the 5 hours that I was given. I still haven't worked on that to do yet, and I'll show you that in a bit. But what's nice is it also shows my time entry on my schedule, right? So there's a schedule grid. It takes account of any of the meetings that you have. So I put a fake meeting on my calendar every day just so that something shows in the calendar, but your actual meetings would show in here and they'll show in blue with the little calendar icon. And then time entries will actually show in green with the little clock. And it'll show what project and task, and then also how many hours you worked on that. So you'll notice my time entered for today is reflecting the hour and the 0.25 that I did through these cards. Okay. The other part of this was the start a timer. If I want the system to track how many minutes or hours I worked on this particular task, then you can utilize the start a timer option. What it does is it docks this over here, and this will show on any of your today pages. So if you have additional today pages that you're working on, you'll also see that dock over there. If I can find another today page, you'll usually see that in a couple of those today pages, you'll be able to see this. This does not stop until you actually go in and physically click on it to stop or pause. Now, if you close out of your browser, it is still ticking because it's ticking down at a server level rather than the browser level. So if you think that just closing your browser will stop that timer, that is not correct. It will continue to tick up until you actually hit that button. So you let Workamajig kind of track how many hours or how many minutes you worked on it as you're working on it. And then at some point, whenever you're done, you hit the done button or the stop button. Otherwise, if you're going to go to break or go to lunch, or you need to stop working on that to work on a different task, you obviously have a pause button. And then when you're ready for that to begin again, you can go ahead and hit that begin button or the play button in order for that to continue to tick. So if I click on the stop button, are you sure you want to stop this timer? Yes. And then again, everything gets filled in for me. So it is quite easy for me to do my time entry within here. So again, same options as before. And then again, when I look at the show more, it'll show me the start and end time. And then if I ever paused it for more than, the couple seconds that I did, it would also register how many minutes that I paused it. Not sure if you would need that information, but the system is tracking that. So really, time entry is pretty simple. Again, the system can track the hours for you, or if you want to indicate how many you've done, then all you have to do is click on that calendar icon or the clock icon, put in how many hours, and then hit save. So there shouldn't be too many issues with doing time entry just because it is quite easy to do. I see that there is a question in here. So is the update feature at the bottom right corner of the task card specific to the task, or does it apply to the whole project? If we're talking about the update side, that is specific to the task, or it could be maybe project status as well, could also have changed. Okay, so following through, again, I mentioned the grid view. This is the exact same information, just showing a little bit different. So maybe you have a different grid. Obviously, you can scroll over to see more information, or if you click into it, this kind of gives you that more of a drop-down option in here to see all of that information. Again, it's all the same. There's not much different. The only difference is to do time entry, instead of that panel showing on the right-hand side, it just kind of shows the add option here. You have this if you wanted to do the timer, so still the same kind of icons that you were seeing before. Otherwise, if I need to just track time to this, then I can go ahead and add in whatever hour. And then if I'm done, again, I'm going to go ahead and mark that as done and go ahead and save. That would then remove this particular task from my grid. So you'll notice it'll say there's one open to do on here. So I never did anything with that to do. What do you want to do with it? So it'll say you can select a person or a service to designate it to, or you can also say, I don't need to assign it, just mark the task complete for me. Before I do that, I wanted to actually go into a little bit more of the detail. So when I click into that, it opens up that side panel, same as it did when we were in the card view. And then this is where that to-do list is. If I click into it, then this is where I can type whatever I need to do. I would also be able to mark it complete if I'm not using statuses. My test site does use statuses. Otherwise, there would be a mark complete option up here. But you can also do a time entry from within here as well. It'll just assume whatever the project and task is that's associated with that to do. That's where ultimately it's going to go ahead and put that time entry. So there can be things that you can, or comments that you can make back and forth about your time or about your to-do if you needed to. Otherwise, again, if I needed to just mark it complete, I would have a mark complete for my test site. Since I have statuses, the one that's is complete is really what's called enable in my particular site. So that would actually mark that to do as done for me. You'll also notice there's an option to add in attachments to to-dos if needed. And then also if you needed to update someone about what you commented on the to-do, then you can email those updates. You click on the button, choose who you're going to notify. And then once you have those emails in there, then you can click out. And then once I go in and submit that comment, it would then email Ben Franklin or whoever I added in about that comment that I have made on that particular to-do. So you'll notice my to-do list is gone because again, I either updated the status to put something that's in the complete status, or I marked it complete if we're not using statuses for our to-dos. In here, you can also see if there was a project description, you'd be able to see that here. Deliverables, if there's anything linked to it, you'd be able to see those deliverables. Deliverables are basically a way to route around files for review. So that's what a deliverable is. We talked about the to-do list. And then the last thing is conversations. So conversations are the communication part that I mentioned earlier. This is ultimately where someone can go in and make a conversation or a discussion on what's going on either with the project or the task. So when I'm in this particular task card, I'd opened it up, there was a conversation section, and it'll show the conversations that are linked directly to this particular task. If there wasn't one directly linked to the task, so on this one, I do not have, I don't really have anything linked to it. So if I click into the task details conversation, there's nothing in here, right? So nothing shows, kind of similar to how that first card had an actual conversation in it. So there wasn't anything directly linked to this task. But what's nice is there's an option to say show all conversations for this project. So if I want to see whether there's been any discussions, not necessarily linked to this particular task, but maybe to the project overall, I can click on the show all conversations, and then you'd be able to see, hey, there was a conversation in here, but it wasn't directly linked to this particular task. Okay, so that's what conversations are, is a way to have those discussions on projects. You can either link them to tasks, or they can just be for the project overall. And then if, again, you are in the task details, there's a way to see all the conversations or just the conversations for this assignment. So you'll notice there's a toggle to go back to just show what's for this particular task. Okay, so that toggle back and forth allows you to either see everything or just what's specific to that particular task. So I'm going to stop for questions. Is there a way to enable reminders for to-dos outside of appearing on the Creative Today page? For example, if a to-do is assigned, an email notifies the user, can it be sent a reminder if the to-do hasn't been marked complete? No, there isn't really notifications for those to-dos separate from having it associated with that task, but there is a to-do board. So if you're using to-dos, then if you go into your menu, you have Project Manager, there's the to-do board. This could be linked to just one particular user. Otherwise, if you're maybe an account manager or something, you can see it for everyone. Again, if you have statuses, it could show up this way. If you don't have statuses, then you're usually looking at those to-dos similar to this. And then this again is every to-do that I have in here, but not necessarily a notification on that. Okay, so then the next item that I mentioned was being able to kind of adjust or edit how this Creative Today page works. So on my card view, I mentioned I can always have all the details show rather than me having to click on the caret in order to get that additional information. Under your More, you're going to have a display options. This will give you the ability of adjusting this screen how you want it to. Display options is just for you. So again, whoever you're signed in as, it's only adjusting for them or for that person and not anyone else. So if I make any changes in here, this isn't affecting anyone but my own Today page. So if I click on here, this is ultimately the options that I have. So I mentioned that schedule that kind of showed on the right-hand side where I put in all my fadings or it logged what time entries I have done. You'd be able to hide that if you wanted to. You can also narrow what results show in here. So right now it's looking at all project types, but you could choose a particular set of project types if you just wanted to show those ones. You can also set a date range. So mine is defaulted to start on or before 2 weeks from today. Otherwise, you have due on or before today, due on or before a week from today. And so you have a couple of different options in here. You also have an all option, but just keep in mind, if you do show all and you don't have this completed predecessors only checked, it'll usually only show the next 6 weeks or so. But if you do have this checked, then it truly does show all if you're utilizing that option. I mentioned the default is to group by due date, but if you would prefer a different grouping, you have a ton of different options in here. For one, you could just not group it all together. You could do by priority project campaigns, clients, tasks, types, project types, account manager, due date, start date. So obviously there's a bunch of different options in here. I like due date just so I know what's due first or what's, kind of supposed to be done before the other tasks due earliest. And then again, ascending or descending. You can also sort by certain things. So again, the same list is quite large. You can go ahead and sort by whatever you would like, but I think the default is that project number, might be client, but either way, you have a couple of options to change what the sort by is. And then again, ascending or descending. This box we recommend not checking, but it basically says open to-do items only. Well, I only had one task that had a to-do on it. So if I check this box and hit save, I have no tasks that have to-dos. So this page would actually show nothing if I check this box because it's only looking for tasks that have open to-dos. Okay, so again, if you know for sure you're assigned to tasks, you're not seeing anything, I would check to see, did this box get checked? I would also look at due date. Maybe it's outside of your due date range. Otherwise, the next item is going to be completed predecessors only. What this means that each of these tasks might have a task that has to be done before it can start. Right? So meaning if I look at the schedule of this project, are there any tasks that are dependent on other tasks before it can go in and be completed? So some people will have like a predecessor, and here it is, column in here. And so what it does is it'll say, well, the initial concept client review approval cannot be done until 2 is done. And it's referring to what line? So here's line 2. So it's basically saying that this task cannot be started until concept creative direction is marked complete. So this task has to be 100% complete before this one will show as ready to work. Okay. So if I was to look at my task list, even though I'm assigned to both of these, so I'm BF here, I'm also BF here, right? Actually, no, I'm not in this one. But if I was assigned to this particular task, this one wouldn't actually show on my Creative Today page up until this task is marked complete because it is dependent on that particular task. Okay, so that's what this box does, is only shows tasks that are ready to work. If I uncheck this, my list might get a little bit bigger. So right now I have like 8 tasks that are showing on here. But if I uncheck this, it's possible that when I go in and save, a few more tasks come in just because those tasks aren't really ready to work. But when I'm looking at this, I'm telling the system, show me everything rather than just what's ready to work. Open deliverables only is kind of similar to to-dos, but it's on the deliverable side. Is there any task that has an open to-do? Or open deliverable, meaning a deliverable that's still going on, if I check this box, then again, it's only going to show me tasks where there's an open deliverable. And so if I check this box, none of these have an open deliverable on it. So I would then see no tasks on my Creative Today page. The next one is auto expand tasks. So I talked about this caret a few times. This is what would have the system automatically show all of the detail on this particular card rather than me having to click on the caret in order to open up each one. So for me, I have this defaulted as the actual system default. This is not checked. So you can choose to check this if you're looking at the card view, and if you want all the information to show, then you're going to check this box. The next thing down is exclude meetings from the following calendar. So when I'm looking at that calendar that showed on the right-hand side of the screen, is there any meetings that I don't want to show? So it'll look to the calendars that I'm looking at or that I have in the system. Is there anything that I wouldn't want to see? You can go ahead and check the box to eliminate items from that particular calendar. And then again, if we're looking at conversations, are we ascending or descending? So again, that is the options that you have in here. Since I unchecked that completed predecessors only, obviously there's quite a few more than the 8 that I had originally. And again, it's just because some of those tasks aren't really ready to work yet, but I chose to show everything. So again, more will show on here if you have that checked, and it's something that you can choose to either leave on or leave off, just depends on what you would prefer. So that is your options for this page as far as what you can change. For the column sets, you'll notice that I didn't have the option in that display options. It's the same display option. So no matter which view I'm looking at, there was no difference. So it doesn't have the option of editing the columns. You would have to have something that says system settings in here in order to be able to edit the columns. So that typically means that an account manager or maybe your admin would need to adjust the columns if you have a particular way that you would prefer to see your Creative Today page on that grid view. So now what I'm going to jump to is this side. So we were on the tasks, which is the default. We've talked about conversations a bit, but this is ultimately where you can see anything that has been unread. So any conversation that you were a part of, those would show in here if you have not read them. Now, once I click into here and look at the details and say, okay, great. And then if you wanted to reply, you have the reply option here. You'll notice it'll add all of these people. So whoever was emailed in that first conversation, they'll also be emailed, but you can choose to remove any of them. You can also add to it. Obviously, if you click on the 2, it would default to staff, but if you wanted to bring in contacts or the team or the project team leads, that kind of thing, you can always add in additionals. You'll also notice there's some shortcuts. So if I wanted to add in a company, I do the @ and then whatever the company is. If I wanted to tag a project, I would do the hashtag symbol and then the project number. If I wanted to add in a contact, it's the exclamation point and then the actual contact. So if I type in something like this, then it's looking to my contact list, and then I can go ahead and actually add in that contact. So that's how you can either utilize the 2 or when you're in here using some of those shortcuts, but this is where the reply would go. You can choose to do formatting. So if I needed to, I have the option of using this little A in here. You'll notice there's a couple of different options. So however you want to set this up, you can. Otherwise, you can unclick on that to get it to go away. And then if I want to post my reply, I can. As before, you also have the ability of adding an attachment. So if there's something that makes sense, maybe I'm working on my rough draft and I want to show kind of where we're at right now, then ultimately you can add in that attachment, click on the plus button, it opens up your computer details, you can choose that, hit open, and then that would actually add in that attachment to that conversation. This is similar or pretty much the same as an email. So you'll notice it was very email-esque. It's doing the same thing as an email. It's just showing that we can see that information in the system as well. So this will show in the project. It'll also show in your conversation side of if it was attached to a particular task, we'd be able to see that communication that went back and forth. And then again, you could do the same with this particular one. You can click in to open it up. You can either reply or not reply, but that's how you can see those. Any questions right now? Okay. So you'll notice that there's a couple of tabs within conversations. These are project conversations, meaning things that are tagged to projects. There is also conversations on the sales side, which probably doesn't really apply to you, but it's basically almost like a to-do on the sales side. So if I needed to indicate that I needed to call someone or join a Zoom on a particular day and time, you can add in conversations, or someone would add in those conversations. But these ones can then be marked complete. So if I've completed whatever this was, I can go ahead and complete, and then that would remove it from this 19. I would then have 18 open items. Again, this might not apply to, so you might only see the project side, and you'll notice it'll say there's no unread conversations. The moment that you click in and read those conversations, they go away from this list because it's assuming that you maybe have done or read whatever that is and understand you've replied as necessary. Otherwise, if you needed to see those conversations, you can get there a couple of different ways. So if I go to the project that it's associated with, then I can scroll down and then there's a conversation side in here. Same thing that we saw before. And then again, this is the reply. It'll go in chronological order, meaning that it'll show the newest conversation first. So any replies, as we continue to reply, those will show kind of towards the top. So I have the most recent information available to me. And then that is where you can go in and kind of converse regarding that particular thread. If you wanted to add in a new conversation, you would have the plus button here. So maybe it's not directly linked to whatever that was. Then I can add in a new thread or chain of discussion if I needed to. And so that would show in this plus button there. It defaulted in a bunch of people just because that's how mine is set. Otherwise, you might have to go in and either add or remove from here as needed. And then again, it's exactly like an email. So add in your subject and then add in whatever your conversation should consist of. This is where we're tagging it to a task. So on 2 of my cards, we saw one was tagged to a task, the other was not. This is ultimately where that designation is coming from. So if I said, hey, I'm working on this particular task and I need to have some discussion on it, then you can go ahead and tie it to that task. It'll still show on the project, but then if I'm associated with that task, it's on my Creative Today page, I would see that conversation as well. You'll notice that it'll say, you've selected clients to review this post, so the visible to client checkbox has been checked. One of these people is a contact rather than an employee. Okay, so an external person rather than a person that has a full Workamajig login. So that means that they can actually see this conversation and the box gets checked automatically. If I didn't add in, so if I uncheck this, it would actually remove the contact from here, or they wouldn't be able to see this conversation because the visible to client is not checked. Okay, so this is how we can prevent if we're having conversations, maybe the client has their own Workamajig login, maybe they should be able to see some of the conversations, but not all of them. This is ultimately where we can indicate whether the client should be able to see this particular conversation or not. If the client wasn't defaulted in as one of the 2 or the addressed 2 people, this is unchecked by default. Okay, so this is not always checked. The default is that it's unchecked, but one of my people in here is an actual contact in the system rather than a employee. So that's why it was checked automatically. There's also the ability of having types. I don't find that a ton of clients are utilizing this, but it's just a way to kind of group conversations together. Maybe we have like client documents as one of them, or client discussions or drafts, whatever it is, but you can always go in and actually add in conversations types, and then that would tag it to this particular conversation. Otherwise, you might not see this box, or you can leave it blank if it doesn't apply to you. Save. And so that's how you can go in and add new conversations. Again, when we're looking at this, always the newest first. So whatever has the most recent activity to it, that will show in chronological order in this conversations section. Any questions right now? Okay. The other part that I wanted to talk through, so we've talked through conversations. You have this daily feed. This is for any project that you're a part of. So this isn't every single project, but it's typically where you're on the team of the project. And if you're assigned to a task, then you're on the team of the project automatically. So just keep that in mind. But it'll show what has happened for today, right? So it's a daily feed and we're looking at Wednesday, which is today. So it's going to show me everything that has happened on here. So it's a good way for me to see what has gone on. It groups it by project and shows what happened. So I assigned a couple of things, people were reassigned, we changed statuses, which was the to-do. The project status got changed on a particular project. So this kind of gives you an update if you wanted to see what has happened for today. And again, on the projects that I'm part of, you do get to see that daily feed in there. Okay, so you have tasks, conversations, daily feed. You can toggle between those. Again, you have a couple of different options as far as how you're viewing this page. You have that search option. You can also favorite tasks. So if you were kind of paying attention, there was a little star either here, or if you're here, it's up here. This allows you to then add in favorites. And again, it's just your favorite. So if you favorite something, no one else can see your favorited tasks. So if I said, hey, something's due, later down the line, but I want to be able to call it out rather than just see it on my whole list, then you can fill in the star just by clicking on it. It'll say that it's been added to favorites. And then when you just want to see your list of favorites, you have the star here. You basically just click on it to fill it in. And then here's my list of favorites. There were some others in there that were pretty old. So you can unfavorite things if you wanted to, but this would just bring up your favorite list. And then when you're ready to revert back to the other list, then you can uncheck that or unfill it in. And then this is back to just your regular, but you will always see the star filled in for anything that is listed as a favorite for you. Some people ask if I can backtrack to see maybe what happened yesterday if I was out of the office, or what happened last week. You can actually backtrack, and then the daily feed will be reflective of whatever date you choose here. I wasn't in my test site that day, so you can see what has happened again on a particular day if you wanted to. And then you can jump back. It'll always have whatever today's date is in blue, just so that you can know where we're at. So this is the blue in there. So you do have the option of kind of going back in time. If this reflects a different date than today, when you do your time entry, it'll also reflect on that particular day. So just be mindful of that. Whatever day you have listed here, when you do those time entries, it would then reflect whatever that date is. Now, obviously, Creative Today page was a great way to see what tasks you're actually assigned to. But how do we track time if we weren't actually assigned to a task, right? So maybe this applies to PTO projects or overhead projects, or maybe I wasn't assigned, but I helped someone out on it and they didn't have time to assign me to that task. Well, you can do that on the timesheet. So 2 ways to get to the timesheet. You have in your Creative Today page, this time entered for today. It's actually a hyperlink. It'll bring you to the timesheet. Okay, and then all the time entries that I've done for today will show in here. Otherwise, if you're not in that Today Creative page in your menu, you can go to the Everyone option, and then there would be a timesheet link here. Again, both will bring you to the same page, so there's no difference between those 2 pages. But if I needed to do that manual time entry, sometimes you're looking at the day view, so just know that you might see it a little bit different than what that week view is. So you can toggle between the 2, and then again, if it's a particular day that you needed to review either yesterday or today, you can either use those arrows, or you can click on the calendar to kind of get to whatever day you need to track that time to. But you have that insert row. And again, I'm on the day view, so it's only going to track the time for today. And when I click on the insert row, it's then going to ask for what project and task. It uses my default service. So in employee records, there's a way to indicate what is this person's main title? What do they typically do? So I'm an account manager, so that shows or that defaults in. But if I did something else, then I can actually choose from the list of services that I provide. Okay. So first things first is, what project did we work on? You can either start typing in to narrow it down. So maybe I know the project number. I can go ahead and type in the project number, the project name, or if you either click on the caret or you hit the space bar, it'll open up all the projects that I can put time to. Okay, so a couple of ways to do it. I'm just going to track to this particular project. And then I can go in and put what task I'm assigned to. You'll notice some are grayed out, right? This one I can actually choose, but these ones I can't. There's limitations, and this would be something that you would talk to your manager or your admin about, but there is limitations to what you can track time to. Typically that would be, can you track time to a completed task? You may or may not be able to do that. Can you track time to something you're not assigned to? Again, that would be something where if I'm not assigned to the task, I might not be able to track time to it. So I have to choose whatever task I worked on. And then again, if I didn't do account management, maybe I did graphic design for this, I can choose what service. I then put in how many hours did I work. So maybe I worked 1.5. You have a start and end time, but you don't have to do that. And then again, there's that comments field if you needed to indicate the comments. You'll notice there's an I'm done with this task. You can technically track time to the tasks that were on your Creative Today page, and then of course mark the task as done. And so then it would update your assignment to say, okay, they're done with this particular task. And you can do that here. But obviously our recommendation is the Creative Today page has all of that detail for you. You're having to do a little bit more work by having to choose what project and task and maybe updating the service, whereas Creative Today page already had that. All you had to do was type in your hours. But if I do this, if I was assigned to this task, it would then mark my part of the task as done. You'll also notice there's an option to click on the plus button for timer. So same thing as you saw before, it'll just dock over here and continue to tick up until you either stop or pause it. And then again, it'll go ahead and update that time entry and track those hours for me. The other item that I wanted to mention is if you click into here, you did not put your project and task. When you start the timer, it's just going to be a blank timer. It's not really going to know what project and task up until you actually go in, choose what project and what task you're working on in there, and then it'll go ahead and update. So just know that you can start your timer before you actually add in the details if you needed to, but we typically recommend adding in the detail first. Now, if you accidentally started a timer and did not need to actually track that time, then I'll show you what I did. I basically stopped the timer, I hit yes, and then instead of filling this out, I can actually just click out. It'll say, are you sure you want to save your changes? Yes, and then that'll go away. So just know that you can use the timers in the page in here, or you can just track your time as you typically would do. You also have that week view. The benefit to this is if I'm going to be working on the same task over a couple of different days, then if it's already in here, so we'll just use this task 4, for example, maybe I worked on it on Monday for an hour, maybe I also did 0.5 on this day, and then maybe wouldn't track it for tomorrow, but you can actually go through and track the hours throughout the week instead of having to be in the day view, insert the row, choose the project, task, and service, and then put in those hours. So if you're working on the same task throughout the week, then it might be beneficial just to go through that week view, put in the project, task, and service, and then for each day that I need to track time, just click into each of those buckets. If you needed to do the comments, the little chat bubble is that comment option. Once you are done with your timesheet, either for the day or the week, depending on what your company is doing, you can do this open timesheets option. This is how to actually submit your time. Okay, so if I click on the open, what it's going to do is show me any time entries that I have. So I had some from March that I never really did anything with. I didn't submit it or approve it. So this will just show me all open timesheets that I need to go in and do something with, right? And again, that's either a submit or approve to really lock down that time and actually have it show on some of the reports. So again, open timesheets meaning things that have not been submitted or approved, and you could do all of them, or you could do it day by day. If you have weekly timesheets, then usually what it does is it just shows April 17th to the 23rd, and then all of the hours for each of those days. Otherwise, if yours are daily, then it looks like this. And then you can go in and approve each of those days or submit if you are not your own timesheet approver. So that is your manual time entry. Again, our recommendation as much as possible is to use that Creative Today page because it's going to save you time on how to actually put in time to the system. Otherwise, if you're not assigned to the task, you need to track your time, then that timesheet will also would be obviously where you would go in and put that time. A couple of places to get there. Some might ask, well, I saw that there's a time option in here, time entry. This is basically just filling out your timesheet. It's basically like the insert row. So not a whole lot of difference. It just, again, depends on where you are. One way might be a little bit faster than the other. So when I do that plus button and I found the time entry option under the everyone heading, it then just brings up where you put your project task, service, hours, and then hit save. It would then again just fill out your timesheet. One thing that I wanted to note is you'll notice the numbers will show a little bit different as far as color. So some are green, right? And then some are black. Green means it's been submitted and approved. Black means that it has not been submitted. It'll also or can also be red if you submitted your timesheet, but that timesheet was rejected. Okay, so there are different colors in here. They do kind of denote what status those time entries are in. So again, if it's green, that means it's been submitted and approved. If it's black, it hasn't been submitted. If it's blue, it has been submitted but not approved. Any questions right now? Okay. So a few extra little items that might be helpful for you all. I mentioned you can have multiple tabs open. Usually they'll show what project. So you'll see it's the 9205. That shows you what project and where you're at in that particular project. If you hover over, you actually get to see a little bit of the detail. I mentioned the hotkey to get that done. You can also do that. So if I wanted to open up the project view, but again, I want that in a different page. I'm holding control before I click, and then when I click, you'll notice it jumps over here. So now I'm in that project page that I just opened up. You also could click on your name. This could be a couple of things for you. I mentioned that default page being the Creative Today page. This is where that default is coming from. Okay, so again, if I'm a creative, this is a great page to have. If I'm not a creative or usually I'm not assigned to tasks, then maybe the timesheet page would be the better landing page for me. So if you click on this blue link, this then allows you to change what your default page is. And so if you then go to whatever your app is, .workamajig.com/platinum, whatever your default is where it's going to take you. So again, some people it's the Today Creatives. For project managers, it's the Project Manager Today page. For others, if they're accounting, there's an Accounting Today page. So this is ultimately where that comes from. I also like to bring you here just so that you know, if you don't already, where you can change your password, right? So click on the pencil button, new password, confirm it, and save. That would then be your password from that point forward. Okay. So that is what I have for you all today. Any last questions before I let you go? Okay. So then again, the recording for this will be posted in the help guide in a couple of days. You can also get to the help guide if you click on your name. If you click on the more, the help guide is here. Again, it's just that support.workamajig.com. But if you weren't aware of how to get there, again, the person's name, go into the more, and then open the help guide. That would allow you to jump to that help guide if you forget the link or if you don't have it favorited. So again, look for the link in a couple of days if you need it. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.